Hey there, I'm Tash, and today I'm going to be sharing COSIV's tips for establishing a threat intel program. A bit about us: we're a cybersecurity consultancy with a focus on threat intelligence. We're also the creators of CloudMISP, a managed MISP service, and you can learn more about our capabilities at cosiv.com. One of the more frequent conversations we have with security leaders is how to establish a new threat intelligence program in their organization. In these conversations, there are a few basic principles that we cover because they're applicable to almost everyone. We're sharing these principles publicly so that more organizations can learn about our threat intel philosophy and avoid the most common mistakes that can lead to failed programs. These principles are based on decades of experience establishing, running, and evaluating threat intel programs across dozens of Australian and New Zealand organizations, including government bodies, universities, major banks, and critical infrastructure operators. First, you need to define your stakeholders. Who are the internal and external stakeholders of your threat intel program? This might include the SOC, the executive team, and industry peers. Anyone who's going to interact with or consume the threat intel that you create is your stakeholder. Your stakeholder's use case should determine the types of intelligence that you collect, analyze, and disseminate. Next, you need to define your products. What information does your threat intel program need to produce? And in what format do your stakeholders want to consume what you're producing? These are the products produced by your program. You should also think about bucketing your threat intel into tactical and strategic products. Tactical threat intel might include automated feeds and periodic alert reporting to the SOC team, whereas your strategic products will typically be used to communicate to business stakeholders. For example, your SOC team may want to consume threat intel in a machine-readable format that integrates well with a log analysis tool, for example, Splunk. Intel at this level of granularity would be useless at the CISO level, where strategic threat intel, like longer-term trends, is much more useful. While the SOC team might need a Splunk integration, the exec team might just want a monthly bullet point summary in a Word document. As part of standing up your threat intel program, you'll need to plan for how these products will be created and shared within your organization, who will manage the creation of these products, and in what format they'll be shared. Next, you need to define what types of threat intel matter most to your organization. Relevancy is always key when it comes to threat intel. You want to build your program to prioritize threat intel related to attacks in your industry, e.g. financial institutions, attacks in your geography, for example, Australia, and vulnerabilities in tools and software that you actually use. There's no reason to disseminate intel on macOS vulnerabilities if your organization only runs Windows. Your threat intel product should also align with reducing your most critical business risks. Otherwise, your threat intel products won't align with the goals of your stakeholders, and you'll struggle to gain adoption for your program. Unclear alignment with critical business risks is one of the key reasons why threat intel programs fail. Next, define your assets. Once you've clearly defined your stakeholder, your products, and the threat intel that matters most to your organization, it becomes much easier to define the assets you'll need to execute your program. It's tempting to start by thinking about which threat intelligence platforms or tips or threat intel feeds you should buy, particularly if you've secured the budget to do so. But first, think about how you're going to consume that fire hose of intel. How will you store it? Have you got the analysts to translate threat intelligence into business value? A common cause of death for failed threat intel programs is that the organization spent too much money on tools and feeds and not enough on analysts. To put it another way, you can run a small, successful threat intel program with nothing more than an analyst and a spreadsheet, but you can't run a successful threat intel program with expensive tools, feeds, and too few analysts to use them well. Next, you need to allocate a realistic budget for your threat intelligence program. Commercial threat intelligence feeds can cost tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. A commercial threat intelligence platform can cost over $100,000 and even up to $500,000 with enough analysts. Mid or senior level intel analysts will cost you at least $150,000 and even up to $200,000 to $250,000 to compete with the highest paying organizations. You can easily spend $1 million to stand up a fully fledged managed threat intelligence function, complete with tools, feeds, and analysts. Now, if that all sounds like a scary amount of money, don't stress. You can actually start a threat intelligence function much more simply and much more affordably, and I'll give you some tips on how to do that a bit later in this presentation. Before you invest this money, it's worth asking a few key questions. Are we investing in all the pieces we need to make this work? Are we confident our threat intel program will show results? How do we measure results? How do we know that the program is producing the outputs that we intended? Next, you've got to allocate analysts. As we touched on earlier, having enough analyst capacity is one of the most often overlooked aspects of a threat intel program. Without enough analyst capacity, your program will be less effective and deliver fewer results. For example, the timeliness of your threat intel will suffer. Let's say there's a new vulnerability with active exploitation affecting part of your toolchain. If it takes a week to get to it, that's way too late. There's got to be consistent throughput, so you're quickly identifying the most relevant intel and disseminating it to the right people within the organization as soon as you can vet it. Prioritize people over automated feeds and platforms. Next, you've got to allocate your software engineering capacity. You'll also want to invest in engineering talent that sits beside the threat intel team. For example, you'll need engineering capacity to integrate your tip into the rest of the organization's systems. You'll need to write custom scripts that sit off to the side to help you automate certain things that your tip doesn't do. You'll need to write services to connect to APIs, do custom searches, custom processing, and more. To do all those things, you'll need access to engineering capability. And you can't let your threat intel program grind to a halt while you wait. In fact, providing extra security-focused engineering capacity is something we often do for our clients at COSIV. But what if I can't do all these things? What if your organization doesn't have the time, budget, or resources to do all of these things? You could start a threat intel program very simply, but people are your starting point. Many successful threat intel programs start out as an analyst with a spreadsheet or a MISP instance, spending a few hours a week following new software vulnerabilities that are out there and then telling people about the relevant ones. For example, they might discover Circle CI was breached and the team uses Circle CI. They need to decide, who am I going to talk to and what do we need to do to mitigate the impact of the breach? Having a simple, low-fidelity system in place can be an excellent way to drive out the requirements for a broader threat intel program when your organization is eventually ready to launch a program at scale. And that's all we've got for this video. We wish you the best of luck with setting up your threat intel program. If you'd like our help or advice on setting up a threat intel program, please get in touch with us at info@cosiv.com.